Madam Senate President Pro Tem.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman, my colleagues, Vice President, Madam Secretary. First of all, we welcome the clarification regarding SPED because it caused quite a stir questions, but I was confident that it would be restored because I've never seen a zero budget for SPED, especially since I also chaired this committee for 5 years, and I don't think there's been a zero budget ever for SPED, but I was sure that there must have been some miscommunication and you would not allow under your leadership and as well here that there would be. So anyway, it's been solved, and in fact there could be further improvements even on enhanced budget, and we welcome the so-called institutionalization of the SPED budget. I will go now to what Madam Secretary, Vice President mentioned on the school building program, because since I started in the Senate in 1998, the word backlog of basic education facilities and classrooms and school buildings has always been one of the challenges of the department. And I see it's already 2023 budget, it's still a challenge. So my question is, will there be a time where we will no longer have a backlog? Because based on your allocation, the 5.947 billion you've allocated for the school building program and the 3.199 billion for 2022, I don't think this will cover all the pending, not just rehabilitation, but new classrooms needed. So my question is, what is the real backlog of classrooms, school buildings, and how long will it take us to overcome that backlog so that we are on the exact number of needs? Of course, we have a growing population and we realize that. And if you were to have your wish list of a budget for the basic education facilities, more particularly the school buildings, how much would that be? So your 4.97 is for how many classrooms? It says here 2,379. Ang layo niyan sa backlog na 165,000 na backlog. And another question is, I have two figures. DepEd says the backlog is 97,000, but per DBM in the DBCC, I see that it was 165,522. So, simple po, ano ba talaga ho ang backlog? At ilang taon pa natin or magkanong pondo para hindi na tayo maka-backlog or hindi pa talaga mangyayari yan? Otherwise, we tanggap na lang natin that we won't be able to meet all of this because for the past 25 years, there's always a backlog and we're never able to catch up with this. Thank you. Madam Secretary or any of your staff in charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Legarda. ASEC Christopher Arnuco will answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Senator, with your indulgence, the 169,000 was based on the 2019 National School Building Inventory. However, recently there was an instruction to conduct a survey from the various regions, and the numbers that we gathered was about 97,408 as of July 2022. But we're still validating it further. As you are aware, calamities happen, and definitely additional buildings will have to be built. For instance, I'll give you an example, which is in the case of Masantol, 6 classroom buildings were burned during the Typhoon Carding. Well, it rained, but it got burned. So these numbers relatively is liquid as we're trying to validate it on the ground. As to the funds, we would definitely need as much as the proposed budget for school buildings, about to restore the 87 billion that was taken from DepEd's budget. It was reduced further to 5.9 billion. If we could access that, and definitely we would be able to provide the backlog. As to the number of years, based on our computations, about 3 years to complete on a continuing construction basis.
So up to 2025, you envision that given your projections for the annual budget, you will be able to complete and there will be zero backlog in 3 years? Is that possible? It seems, I actually heard that statement also decades ago. but we still have a huge backlog. Oo. But
Yeah.
are you optimistic we'll finish it in 3 years? Parang imposible.
Yeah, well, the backlog, ma'am, is due to the lack of appropriate budget to actually cover it. So it gets protracted because we could not meet the numbers. However, if the budget is restored and with an aggressive point to really make our partnership work with DPWH or even with our regional offices to conduct the necessary procurement, we might be able to hit the 3-year projection period.
It's the 2022 status of its obligation, disbursement, and your actual implementation of the present year's budget of 3.199 billion. Are my figures correct? It's 3.1 billion for this year. It's already September. What is your status of utilization?
It's with DPWH, ma'am. We will have to ask DPWH to give us those numbers.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. You
I'm
should
sure you
know
would have the
that.
figure.
You should know that.
Meron kayo niyan. Meron kayo. Alam ko ang pondo
Yeah.
nyo at alam ko rin na may MOA ang DPWH at saka kayo
Thank
na
you, ma'am.
sila nag-i-implement pero meron kayong figures niyan.
Correct, ma'am. So, as to the obligated, it's about 13.45%. This is based on the report that was given to us,
13 or 30?
13.45%. As to the disbursement, ma'am, it's about 18.03%. But as I've said earlier, while we have these figures, we will have to work closely with DPWH on the completion of the.
Okay, which brings me to my question. It's not a matter of Congress giving you the budget because you have a 3.199 budget and it's already the last quarter of the year. Yes, DepEd is the one that constructs and only rehabilitation and refurbishing is done by DepEd itself. But you only have a 13%, correct, disbursement and 18% obligation? What is it? Or is it the other way around?
The other way
The other
around.
way around. Okay, whichever it is, it's way below the 20%. So even if Congress gives you your wish list to complete the backlog in the basic education facilities, school buildings, but your rate of obligation is so low, may I know, Madam Secretary, it's also good that you know this as a new Secretary of DepEd. This is a perennial, it's an annual problem, regardless of administration. What is the problem between DepEd and DPWH that the monies given by Congress is not timely allocated, utilized, implemented to the detriment of the utilization of the funds for our children? Ano po ang problema palagi?
Ma'am, I can only surmise that for 2022, given that we had an election, so election ban is a factor. Second is the number of calendar days or the timeline that the pre-construction timeline proposed, which is about 239 days. This is from DPWH based on our number. So what we're saying is that if we are allowed to procure, we would be able to reduce it because we would be able to streamline the process of procurement. However, this is how it's timelined.
I'm not certain. You know, this is not the first year problem. Every year, for in fact decades, that's always a problem. The utilization of the building fund, the school building fund. USEC knows this. Ano kaya? I'm certain in the time of Madam Secretary, would we be able to find the solution to a quicker utilization of the fund? Sayang, nandyan ang pera, and we're only using less than 20% by the end of the year already. Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Legarda. Ma'am, this is something that is already in the list of the items we want to take up in the meeting on Monday. Actually, I was happy that I received the message this afternoon from DBM that DPWH will sit down in that meeting as well.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and we hope that by the time we reach the plenary, we will be able to address this. USEC knows this. This is an annual problem, not just in your time, but in previous administrations. Otherwise, sayang po ang pondo na linalaan at gusto man naming itaas po ang inyong budget, pero kung hindi nagagamit, ay sayang na sayang po. Which you mentioned about disasters. paano ba ang dapat gawin para hindi gamitin na ang ating mga eskwelahan as evacuation centers? I think, where did I see it? There's 63% of schools which are used as evacuation centers according to a study. So I'd like to know about the learning conditions during disasters so that there's learning continuity. Being a disaster-prone country with more than 20 typhoons, alam naman natin, hindi natin mapapagbawal yan, but how will we be able to do learning continuity even during times of disasters? What do we do? We cannot prevent them from not using the schools.
Sorry,
Yes, Secretary.
before the Vice President answers, no, to be clear, we can prevent them by law. By law, they're not supposed to. But I know the Vice President has made a statement on that. I just wanted to clarify that we should be able to prevent them.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Will we do that? Otherwise, where do we put them? Yes.
Yes, Honorable Legarda. Your Honor, I released a recent department order where I instructed our field offices not to allow our schools to become more or less permanent evacuation centers. So we only allow not more than 15 days of schools to be used as evacuation centers. I already raised this as well with the Secretary of the ILG so that he can speak to his LGU officials as well, that this is the direction of the Department of Education, because before August 23, when we were conducting an inventory of our schools, we found out that some of our schools are still used as evacuation centers for Odette and the landslide in Leyte. That is why we released that department order and talked to the Secretary of the ILG. But our USEC for field operations, USEC Escobedo, can add more about the answer, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam VP and Madam Chairman. We have a law that provides for the construction of evacuation centers in every municipality, and that schools should be the last resort in terms of using our schools as evacuation sites. But in the event that there is no evacuation center in a municipality and our schools are used as evacuation sites, then our teachers will resort to alternative delivery mode of learning delivery, which means that we will resort to a modular learning or online, and we advise the local government that the use of our schools as evacuation site will be just 2 to 3 days, because we have to use also our schools for our learners. And this recent typhoon Carding, we have schools that were used as evacuation centers in Nueva Vizcaya, but the evacuees just used our schools just 1 day or 2 days at most.
The memo of the Secretary was 15 days, not more than 15 days, right? Yes, yes. So thank you for that answer, and we hope that, I'm not sure if it's a law, I think it's just a bill that every LGU is mandated to provide its own evacuation center. I don't think it's still a law, and if it's a law, it may be an unfunded law because it's not the case. We don't see 1,600 evacuation centers in every city and municipality. But talking about disasters, the issue of mental health, and during typhoons, during the pandemic, and we know that the issue of the hiring of plantilla guidance counselors is also a challenge, because you may have the funds for that, but only, is this accurate, 42% of the items are filled for guidance counselors. We know that registered guidance counselors are difficult to higher? May we know, Madam Secretary? We spoke about this a few months ago when you visited my province, when we, although this was a college student, but we talked about the importance of mental health and the possibility of hiring or having guidance counselors and psychologists in schools. May we know if the DepEd has a program for post-pandemic recovery for guidance counseling, and why is it that at least 42% of the plantilla provided for is still unfilled to date? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. The matter of the program will be answered by Yusek Escobedo of the Field Operations, and the matter on the HR will be answered by Yusek Mercado of BHROD.
Thank you. Actually, we've been advertising the positions for guidance counselor, but there are no takers because one is the position is very low. It's only grade 13, no? And the grade level is very low. And there are no, the market is not, the labor market does not have as many guidance counselors. Some guidance counselor would even prefer to teach rather than act as guidance counselor because of the progression also. There's no very clear progression yet of the guidance counselor, while as the teachers have very clear career progression. But we're trying to level off with DBM to come up with a different system that we can scale down the requirement. Like psychology graduates can apply for the position, and our NEAP, the National Educators Academy, would just develop some program that would build their competency for guidance counseling. So we hope that that would be approved in scaling down our qualification standards. Thank you, Madam Senator.
Madam Senate President Pro Temp, let me add, no? I think you didn't mention, but we've had it in our previous discussions over the years. The requirement is even more difficult because it's such a low salary grade. And then there's a masteral requirement. Masters. So the chairman and I were talking about it. It's kind of really embarrassing. No? It's such a low. No? Anyway, I've also had a discussion with our new DBM secretary on that. No? But she will need your input on creating that career path because it's really so much needed now. So please work with her. As you said, you've already started, but I've already told her that this is something that we've been trying to do. Kindly work with her para baka next budget, no? Maano na natin to. Can you imagine if other teachers just need to get the teachers can get a master's, or imagine we're so rigid about it. Like you said, no, psychology graduate, di yata pwede, talagang kailangan guidance counselor. It's crazy.
And Madam Chair, aren't you supposed to pass a professional exam also to be a guidance counselor?
Yes.
So that's another restriction. That's another hurdle. It's another
the requirement
hurdle
for passing the exam for guidance counselor. Tsaka mataas yung level nung kukunti lang yung pumapasa nung guidance.
Yeah, that's right. So that you limited yourself already there in itself. So you know, the aim is good, Madam Chair. No, you want to professionalize and have qualifications, but unfortunately, we've taken it to fetishistic levels. Masyado may fetish na tayo with titles and degrees when really the trend is really towards competencies rather than titles and qualifications. So I think you're the educators, you're the ones in charge. I think we have to really have that spirit there. Like in CHED, we want a master's degree for all the or a doctorate for all the state college presidents and officers, you know. So what you end up is you have all these people trying to get PhDs from the easiest possible school, di ba? Para matapos nila kaagad rather than have a quality degree, di ba? So unfortunately, that's the perverse effect of some of our policies. So sana we move towards competencies rather than titles, qualifications, degrees.
Thank you.
Senator Loren still has the floor.
I still have a few minutes. Thank you.
But Senator Hontiveros had a follow-up question before you jumped to the guidance counselor. It was still on disaster risk. Go ahead, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Salamat, Madam Chair, at salamat, Sen. Loren. Sec, about the contact time. So, may department order kayo na maximum 15 days lang pwedeng gamitin ng schools for evacuation centers. But still, 15 days 15 days less contact time out of yung 200 days. So, estimate mga 7% pa rin yon ng contact time among the students and teachers. So, at hindi pa po kasama yung ibang mga interference. So, pagkatapos po ng disaster, pag naibalik na sa school yung sole na paggamit sa eskwelahan, paano yung catch-up plan for learning?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Ontiveros. Actually, ma'am, even if they do not attend in-person classes, there is an assumption that there is a distance learning, particularly with modular assignments or online if it is possible.
Salamat kaayo, Sec. And salamat, Madam Chair and Sen. Loren.
Actually, what I just want to add, because I had the luxury of time now when I had the briefing with your team, Vice President, it was very nice that the chart that they showed me, wherein the mandate is everybody is face-to-face, but the exception would be this is now the best time to introduce blended and flexible learning when there are circumstances such as disasters, isolated areas. That's the time we introduce blended learning. That's the exact time to do that, and I appreciate that we made that distinction. Thank you. Maybe you can show that later on kasi it's a very nice visual that, you know, para klaro tayo. Hindi basta-basta lang na modular tayo kung pwede naman mag face-to-face, diba? You use it when it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I go to the issue of reading literacy. We've all read in the past months the OECD report when we were one of the countries that was surveyed, and this is the PISA report, the Program for International Student Assessment, which said that 1 in 4 Filipino students now have difficulty in reading. We've all read that in the past few months. What are the new programs of the DepEd? Are there changes in the curriculum to be able to address this very special need at this most critical time on the challenges in reading literacy?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Our USEC for Curriculum and Instruction, USEC Aviola.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Honorable Senator Legarda. First of all, we conducted this PISA in 2018, and the result came out in 2019. And I think that was the basis of our findings. And after that, we came up with an intervention. And we hope that it will assist us to catch up with this observation. We have this PISA, we conducted another PISA last June 2022, and we are waiting for the result come 2023. So,
Intervention that the DepEd did.
one of these intervention is to improve the standard of our teachings. Yes. Yes.
Madam President, if I may. Madam President, during our many discussions about this learning loss, first of all, while there is seemingly and obviously a learning loss, there is no conclusive evidence that there is such. In other words, there was no real study made. But we conclusively had that even the world poverty, the loss poverty, the learning poverty that the World Bank assessed our country is simply a simulation. But obviously there is. So what we're doing right now at DepEd is we've spoken with the curriculum and instruction strand to carry on all assessment tools possible, whether from our side or from the private sector. In a crisis environment, we are allowed to do a hit and miss. Because if we do not try to hit and miss or try to use these assessment tools, we'll not be able to know whether or not there's really a real loss. The private sector, several private sector schools, including that of the University of San Carlos and Thames International Business Schools, has proposed to us certain assessment tools that they've been using for many private schools, and we intend to use that assessment tool for public schools. Just to confirm that there is such a loss, a learning loss, prevailing right now. we've already done the assessment of the K to 10. There's now an internal and external consultation with stakeholders before we launch the new curriculum for K to 10. By November, we'll start to assess K to 12, and hopefully in 6 months' time, we'll be able to redo the curriculum of K to 12. And more importantly, as mentioned by Chairperson Senator Angara, we will focus more on competencies rather than titles. In other words, many of us in the executive committee of the DepEd will focus at looking at initially at the K to 3 curriculum, looking at it in a more practical perspective rather than theoretical. And we've already accepted a certain principle, at least in the part of the DepEd today, under the leadership of Vice President Secretary SARA, that we will challenge the perspective of the experts. In other words, the words of the experts may not necessarily be gospel truth. So we will have to balance the perspective of the experts and the perspective of the practical side of education, and we will have to listen to our stakeholders, including the teachers, including the parents, and even the students themselves. So this will be a whole of nation approach to be able to address this so-called learning loss. And the 2019 PISA result is also is already to some extent a conclusive way of telling us that there is already learning loss, having landed last among 79 countries in reading comprehension and second to the last in math and science. So we are in a crisis situation in the education sector that was made clear to us by Secretary SARA, by VP SARA, mentioning even to us that we are lost in the forest right now because we are too theoretical in addressing learning loss rather than being practical and looking at the competence side of it. So that's all, Madam Chair.
Can I clarify? Yes, Madam Vice President.
Yes, Your Honors. We instructed for our field offices to create their own learning recovery and continuity plan, and we have strategies to accelerate these learning recovery continuity plans, one of which is profiling and clustering of learners based on academic needs or learning gaps. Number 2 is expand learning time. Number 3, strengthen the implementation of the policy on engaged time on tasks. Number 4, conduct end of school year or summer learning remediation intervention programs. Number 5, develop learning remediation and intervention resources. Number 6, implement in-person and virtual study groups or buddy system. Number 7, engage parents, legal guardians in facilitating learning. Number 8, intensifying implementation of reading intervention programs. Number 9, intensify the use of the English language in teaching learning process for subjects taught in English. Number 10, conduct regular home visitation and follow-ups. Number 11, establish literacy at home and in the communities. Number 12, conduct professional development activities for teachers, including the Learning Action Cell sessions. Number 13, hire additional learning support aides. And number 14, intensify instructional supervision. For the past 2 weeks, we were doing focus group discussions among the different strands in the Department of Education. And then one thing we learned is that there is no national reading program for our learners. So it is up to the field to develop their own reading program through their Brigada Escuela. And this is something that I think should be worked on by the Department of Education, a national reading program for our K to grade 3.
Be happy to support that. And I appreciate you're giving us your 14 pointers. That was what I meant. I wanted to know the interventions that will be done by the DepEd and the Vice President Secretary. So, succinctly told us what will be done. I would be happy to receive perhaps the operationalization of those 14 pointers as an intervention to the 2018 OECD PISA study where we landed last with Dominican Republic. Yes, thank you very much for that answer. I will not ask you now to give me the details of those 14 points, but I would be so happy to see how each field office would be helped in terms of the pointers that you had said and how we can help in terms of yes, establishing a national reading program. That would be so exciting to as one of the programs of the Office of the Secretary. And will you be allowed to do that also in the field offices of the Office of the Vice President, or even in a DepEd regional offices? That would be good. I don't think we've embarked on such a national reading program in the recent years, have we?
None, Your
DepEd?
Honor. Yes, yes, Your Honor. There is no national reading program.
Will this be in English?
The direction of President Marcos is that we go back to the bilingual program, which is subjects that are supposed to be taught in Tagalog, should be taught in Tagalog, and English subjects that are supposed to be taught in English should be in English.
Lingual English and Filipino.
Yes,
It
correct.
would be helpful if the committee, through our chair and vice chair, members of the could receive perhaps a clearer a concept note on the national reading program, which we would like to support. I have more questions, but I don't want to take too much time of all my colleagues. I can see the chair staring at me already, but I have so many more questions. But
Bilis
thank
na
you.
yung second round. Konti na lang tayo dito.
Yes, but thank you. Did I use my 10 minutes
You
already?
did.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. No, kilala man ako ni Yusek Ann, talagang we just support DepEd, and we want everything to be supported. But bilin lang ha, yung 18% or no 13% utilization ng school building, naku naman, Oktubre na tayo. I'm sure that the Secretary would not allow any waste of funds with regards to the infrastructure that needs to be built. Thank you very much for your patience, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank
Of course, anytime. Before I go to the next senator who will ask, which is Senator Riza, I just want to wrap up the issue, at least insofar as it has been discussed, no, on the school buildings, no, to also give the Vice President Secretary and background. In the 3 years that I chaired the committee the budget of DepEd, Yusek Ann, you will remember, I hosted in my own office meetings between DepEd and DPWH. So, ASEC Arnuco, in all due respect, you need to know these things. Okay? You should have come here knowing those things and not tell us na you will ask. Kasi you took over from whoever was handling this, and we've had these discussions, right? I trust, in fact, VP Secretary, the following year, maayos na. At least maayos yung discussion, no? On the implementation, I leave that to the agencies. Pero maayos na yung discussion, natapos na yung turuan. Which is why, dear colleagues, one of the very important budget requests they have is that, and I don't know the right term, that evaluation, the site valuation. Importante yun kasi yun yung toka ninyo, di ba? Or I don't know now with devolution kung toka nyo yun insofar lang as the 5th and 6th, make it clear na lang. But that was such an important thing because after you evaluate it, yun lang naman ang nirereklamo ni DPWH noon na hindi nila magawa kasi hindi pa clear kung ano dyan, tapos malulubog pa pala yung lupang yan, maayos na kayo doon. So I'm just saying, you've done all that. Ideally, you're ready for funding, but now you have to ensure that DPWH is on board because it's a new team. When Secretary Mark was there, naayos natin yan, which actually took about a year, ha? Pero naayos natin yon. So now you have a new DPWH secretary, and I leave it to your good office to work with them. Very quickly, I want to flash on the screen the same. A similar table that I showed in the DBCC briefing. This 91,000 is a figure that came from the basic education hearing chaired by Senator Gatchalian. So it's not too far from the other 90,000, but anyway, that came from the hearing. So using the current budget that you have, the 5.92 billion, you'll only have 2,368 classrooms. If you intend to fulfill this gap, to close this gap in 6 years, then it's 15,000 classrooms that you'll be building per year, and that's 37 billion. Anyway, you can read the whole thing, okay? So I leave that with everybody because at least clear tayo. And I had this discussion. I showed this slide to Secretary Mina, and I'm very happy, Mr. Chairman, that she told me that they're now having meeting on this to at least be clear kung ano yung kaya nilang gawin. Di ba? Para we don't waste time na trying to decide na saan tayo. Di ba? At least it's clear. Na in the next 6 years, sabi nga niya, she can only commit to 6 years, of course. But at least we know after 6 years, we left the gap smaller. Something like that. I'll just show quickly another slide just based on another number. But it's the same formulation. Just based on the number of, was it 127,000, which was a number present that I had in the 2021 budget hearing. So it's similar, but it's just based on a different number. Are we showing that? Okay, never mind. Anyway, I also have I just wanted you to show the numbers. Based on 2021, it was 127,000. I'm glad lumiit. So, by praying, lumiit ng 30,000, Mr. Chairman, ang gap. Okay. Anyway, it's now the turn of Senator Risa Hontiveros. You have the floor, ma'am.
Salamat, Madam Chair. Sec, ang mga tanong ko po para sa inyo. But first, Madam Chair, if I may, just a brief greeting or opening statement. So, Madam Chair, to the DepEd family, led by our Education Secretary, Vice President SARA Duterte, and colleagues, magandang gabi po. At the outset, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my support for the DepEd in its vision for Filipino learners to be holistically developed in basic education and to acquire 21st century skills that will enable them for civic participation and engagement anchored on distinctly Filipino values of being makatao, makabansa, makakalikasan at makadiyos. I also share the belief of DepEd that the Philippine government must commit to investing more in the education sector at par with the international benchmark and in line with the constitutional mandate. However, as much as we want to give in to the request of the DepEd for more budget, reportedly asking for an additional 100 billion pesos, our overall high macroeconomic uncertainty and competing public interest spending constrain our fiscal space. So, given this reality, it's self-evident that we have to do more with less. And to do more with less would mean not letting scarce funds go to waste, parked and hidden somewhere, or just return to the national treasury. So, yung unang tanong ko po on the education fiscal space. So, the CPBRD of the House noted that DepEd's budget utilization rate is 96.7%. If this utilization rate remains constant in 2023, a 3.3% will still become an unused appropriation amounting to around 23 billion pesos, which would still be high. So may I inquire how the DepEd intends to continuously improve its budget utilization to close the gap in the education sector?
Right, thank you. Yusek Sibilia of the Finance Strand.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Honorable Senator Ontiveros. Actually, ma'am, talagang mahirap ma-reach ang 100% budget utilization. It's really impossible. For example, in procurement, nobody will bid exactly the same price ng approved budget for the contract. So that is something na palagi rin po namin ina-explain na it's really very difficult to reach. In fact, ma'am, 97% is really the perfect for the financial performance. Yung 3% po, talagang napakalaki niyan for the Department of Education. But what we are doing is, pag maaga po ang procurement, pwedeng mag-reorder. At yun po yung ginagawa natin na sana maaga na mapoprocure ang mga dapat na i-procure. And I think yung pong sa school building program, I would like to add and confirm na talaga pong maraming improvement na nangyayari noon. Kasi minsan binibigay yung budget, hindi pa po ready for implementation. And so what we're doing is what we propose or what we request should be ready for implementation. And actually po, ma'am, kung magpo-propose tayo, talagang yung pinakita ni Senator Pia, it would be the ideal. But we are not requesting for that because it's not possible to be implemented in 1 year time. So, yun din po yung ginagawa namin sa lahat ng mga program teams and executive committee members na kung ano yung kaya natin, that's we call the absorptive capacity. And we assess kung ano po yung kulang pa sa amin. I think planning is also very important. Kaya po sa finance, laging kapartner yung planning. Isa pa po sa gusto naming mangyari is yung early procurement activity. So kahit wala pa po yung GAA 2023 using the NEP 2023, our undersecretaries are instructed by our BP Secretary to prepare for 2023. At yun po sana yung mga early procurement activities, or isa pa po ito, policies. Sometimes nandiyan na po yung budget, kagaya na nangyari sa SPED, kailangan po yung policy nakahanda na para po pag na-approve yung budget, ready for implementation. So these are the things po na amin pong ginagawa. Isa pa rin po na maganda is at the end of the year, when you have a saving at nagkakaroon po ng mga batas na nagbibigay ng allowances or benefits, pinaghahandaan din po namin yun. But this is only chargeable to personnel services or PS. Isa pa po, ma'am, ang tingin namin, ang bulk ng aming savings ay yung sa filling up of position. Kasi po yung availability rin ng mga yun nga, yung mga takers. For example, we have budget for guidance counselors, pero wala naman pong nakakapasa or hindi nako-qualify, or sometimes it takes time. So ito po yung mga savings na at the end of the year nakikita namin. But we are really trying our best, ma'am, by moving forward together as a team with the proper planning and regular financial monitoring po. Thank you po, Your Honor.
Maraming salamat din, Yusek Sevilla. It's always good to hear how yung iba't iba pang maraming tasks ng department ginagamit nyo para ma-maximize yung utilization even further, and in that way create even more fiscal space for the department. Chair, were you going to? Okay. Yes.
Secretary would like to say something.
Yes, thank you, Your Honors. In addition to that, the finance strand for this year, we already inventoried the budget that will lapse by December 31, and you have the number. Yes, and we already wrote the strands who have pending items, and much of it is with the procurement because of the election ban and the delay in the reconstitution of our bids and awards committee because of we were waiting for the appointments of our USECs and ASECs.
Salamat kaayo, Sec. To my next subject, Madam Chair, on affirmative action on IP education. So it's come also to my attention that the IP education program's budget was reduced from 144.3 million pesos this year 2022 to 53.4 million pesos in the NEP 2023. So kung tama po ito, may I inquire as to the reason for this significant decrease by 2/3, and given the reduced funding, what's to be done to strengthen our IP education program despite this loss of 90.9 million pesos?
Yes, thank you. Yusek Sevilla of the Finance Strand will answer.
Maraming salamat po, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, talagang ang 2020 and 2021 had a big effect in our program implementation because of the no face-to-face blended, yung naging blended approach po tayo. At ng lahat po ng programa namin, we try to reprioritize and reallocate. But for IPED, marami po sa mga programa nila requires the convening of learners. And so that's the reason why yung utilization po nila ay mababa in the 2 previous years. At yun po yung nangyari sa NEP nila. But IPED will be among the restorations that we will request our budget sponsors to do. So kasama po dito yung SPED, IPED, and all the other curriculum and instruction programs na mababa po yung utilization in the past 2 years. And we will internally realign using our flexible learning options po na pondo.
Salamat, Yusek. Kaugnay pa rin nito, whether it will be Yusek still to answer or the SEC would care to comment, central to that IP education program of ours is the recruitment and the hiring of IP teachers o yung ating mga guro mula mismo sa mga katutubong komunidad. So, may I ask the Secretary or the Yusek if there is an ongoing program that encourages scholarships for teachers' education from IP communities? And can this also in particular be given attention in the utilization of funds sa ilalim ng Education Human Resource Development Program?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yusek Mercado of BHROD will answer.
Yes, ma'am. We already have a department order for hiring of IP teachers, and we also have allotted a fund from our National Educators Academy program, which is building competency for teachers, specific to IP concerns. So that's taken care of. Thank you, Senator Risa.
Salamat din po, Yusek Mercado. That's good to hear po. And on a final note on this one, I recall during the SONA that the Secretary wore a Bagobo Tagabawa dress to raise public awareness on the plight of indigenous communities caught in armed conflicts. And knowing the Secretary's advocacy for peace and order, I would like to ask if DepEd, by way of affirmative action, might voluntarily realign its confidential fund to fully restore the budget cut on the IP education program. Or, as a prior question, Sec, para saan po ba yung confidential fund?
Yes, for our confidential funds, this is based on the Joint Circular 2015-01 of the COA, DBM, DILG, Governance Commission, and the Department of National Defense. And the use for this confidential funds is expenses pertaining or related to surveillance activities in civilian government agencies that are intended to support the mandate or operations of the agency, particularly those listed in 4.8 of the joint circular. And that is the purchase of information necessary for the formulation and implementation of programs, activities, and projects relevant to the national security and peace and order, rental of transport vehicles related to confidential activities, rentals and incidental expenses related to the maintenance of safe houses, purchase or rental of supplies, materials, and equipment for confidential operations that cannot be done through regular procedure without compromising the information gathering activity concerned, payment of rewards to informers, non-employee of concerned government agency subject to the following conditions of A, B, and C, and uncover, prevent illegal activities that pose a clear and present danger to agency, personnel, property, or other facilities and resources under the agency protection, done in coordination with appropriate law enforcement agencies, other than that, which may be authorized by the GAA. Some of the issues and challenges that we have encountered in our field operations are the drug involvement of our personnel and our learners. We already have a case where our teacher is selling drugs to our learners, and all forms of abuses. We have physical abuse, we have sexual abuse, and other forms. And then there is also the recruitment in violent extremism and terrorism. We also have schools which are targeted for recruitment of learners in insurgency. We also have cases, and we are working right now on the involvement of our personnel and our learners in child pornography. We are currently working with this with the Department of Justice and other illegal activities that our learners are recruited inside our schools, as well as these scams that are happening online and inside our schools, both of which victimize learners and teachers. These are just examples of cases that we have encountered in field operations.
Well, daghang salamat, Sec. I will return to my earlier question about realigning to restore fully the budget cut on the IP education program. But I do just feel the need, Madam Chair, to make of record na yung subject activities in the joint circular, parang mas bagay po, honestly, mas bagay pang confidential and intelligence funds for our existing national security, national defense, law enforcement, even women and children protection bodies, governmental bodies and programs. So just for the record on that, Madam Chair. But I'll return also to my question, Sec, kung bilang affirmative action, kung voluntarily po i-realign ng department yung confidential fund para makumpleto ulit yung natanggal na budget cut sa IP education program.
With regard to budget cuts, we can, within the Department of Education, we can work out realignments and realignments in our budget so that we can fund activities, programs, activities, and projects that need funding. With regard to the confidential funds, this is a proposal that we submitted to Congress. And as I said earlier, with regard to the confidential funds of the Office of the Vice President, we submit to the wisdom of Congress with regard to the amounts and the proprietary matter on decision on the confidential funds. But we would like to put it on record that we reassure the Congress and the public that these funds will be used in relation to what is allowed in the joint circular of those agencies mentioned earlier, 2015-01. Thank you.
Salamat po, Sec. And I appreciate, Madam Chair, yung reiteration ni Secretary nung na-appreciate din ni Minority Leader kanina, yung unang sinabi nila sa House noon na the Department will submit to the wisdom of Congress dun sa halaga, kung mayroon man, at yung propriety ng pagkakaroon ng confidential and intelligence funds ng department for such activities enumerated in the joint circular. So, if I still have time, Madam Chair, in this round? Okay, salamat, Madam Chair. Balikan ko lang po yung sa ECCD, if the Secretary would care to add dun sa sinagot ni Sir Isip earlier. From the higher and the broader perspective of the department, bilang ang ECCD program or ang ECCD Council attached